We are now on the back of this paper, which is all about graphing logarithms. So, the best way to graph logarithms, in my opinion, is to not graph logarithms, but instead to do the inverse, which is to change it into an exponential function and then graph an exponential function, which is going to be its inverse, which you'll see. Basically, you're going to solve for x. So in this case, it says y equals the log of some stuff plus 1. So the first thing you're going to have to do is to get rid of this 1. That is because it is not inside the log. Anything in front of the log, anything after the log, you have to get rid of before you do this thing called exponentiating. So in this one, we would subtract 1 first to get y minus 1 is equal to log of stuff. Boom. Okay. Like that. Next, because now there's nothing in front of the log and nothing after the log is by itself and we can exponentiate, which is that thing where it's like, okay, what is the base? The base is a half. Since the base here is a half, we're going to be using a base of 1/2. So we're going to exponentiate. That is, this is now 1/2 to this power, and this is 1/2 to the y minus 1. Exponentiating is the opposite of log, so they can cross out. And over here you have 1/2, I'll put it in parentheses, to the y minus 1 is equal to, this crosses out and you just got x minus 1. So it's exponentiating. To finish this up, you would add 1 to both sides, and you would now have x equals 1/2 to the y minus 1 plus 1. Oops. Okay, there you go. So that is the new equation we are going to use. Once again, this is like the inverse. I mean, technically these are the same. It's just this is written differently. So like this used to be a horizontal asymptote when we were doing exponentials. But now this is going to be the vertical asymptote. So we're going to have a vertical asymptote at x equals 1. Because on the front it was y equals. Now this is x equals 1. There's a vertical asymptote. You would still make a table. But this time you're plugging in numbers for y, because y is in the exponent. So what number would you use for y? The answer is 1. 1 minus 1 would be 0. So you want this to be 1. So we'll use 1 in the middle for y. Then 1 below and 1 above. So if you plug in 0, then 0 minus 1 is negative 1. And anytime you have something in negative first power, it flips it. So this would be, instead of 1 over 2, it would just be a 2. And 2 plus 1 is 3. So over here you put 3. Boop. Putting 1. Putting in 1 makes 0. So 1/2 to the 0 is 1. And 1 plus 1 is 2. And finally 2, 2 minus 1 is 1, so you'd end up with 1/2 to the first plus 1, which is 1/2 plus 1, which you don't need to think too hard about. 1/2 plus 1 is 1 and 1/2. You're going to be graphing these things, so you don't need to do decimals or fractions or anything. It's just 1 and 1/2. So 3, 0 is right here. No, it's not. 1, 2, 3. 2, 1. 1 and 1/2, 2. So we got those points, which means it's going to look like that. Which means the domain, the furthest left it gets is 1. And then it goes to infinity. And the range goes down forever and up forever, so that's all real numbers. So that's the first problem. But the second problem, in this one, you once again see if the log is by itself, which it almost is. If this negative sign wasn't here, you could just immediately go exponentiate with the 3. But because there is a negative sign in front, your first step does have to be to divide by -1. In which case you'd end up with negative y is equal to now a positive log, base 3 of x plus 4. So since there's nothing in front and nothing in back, you can now exponentiate. Since the base is 3, we will exponentiate with 3. So we have 3 to the negative y is equal to x plus 4. To get x by itself and get rid of the 4, you subtract 4. And you end up with x equals 3 to the negative y, and then minus 4. And that minus 4 is down here. It is not up there. Because it is done after exponentiating, it's over there, which means it will be our vertical asymptote. Right there, vertical asymptote. And since it is vertical, it isn't x equals, so you do have to put x equals for full credit. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? Yeah, okay. So x equals negative 4, vertical asymptote. For our table, y being 0 would make this 0. So, at this point, if you haven't been, pause it, see if you can finish it. Otherwise, I'll walk through it. But if you plug in 0, negative 0 is still just 0. So 3 to the 0 is 1. And 1 minus 4 is negative 3. If you plug in 1, then it would be 3 to the negative 1. And 3 to the negative 1 is a third minus 4. So a third minus 4 is negative 3 2/3. Yeah, okay. And then with negative 1, a negative 1 is a positive 1. So 3 to the first is 3. 3 minus 4 is negative 1. Okay, so there's the points. Looks like it's going to swoosh this way. Like so. So domain, negative 4 to infinity. And range, all real numbers. And that should finish it for this problem. And that should finish it for this paper. So, yay! That is how you graph logarithms without a calculator. Good times.